Today we're going to look at how to factor or solve a quadratic by using factoring, how we factored in the past couple of days. This is chapter 4, this is day 1, chapter 4, topic 8. So remember, the solution is the x-intercept. Solution is the x-intercept. The x-intercept occurs when the y-coordinate is 0. So if we have an equation, y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, and we set the y-coordinate equal to 0, so 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c, this equation, solving this equation, would give us the x-intercept. Well, this is also going to give us the solutions to this equation. Alright, and the way that we're going to solve these is by factoring and using the zero product properties. So remember what we're looking for when we're doing this. We're finding the roots, the zeros, the solutions, and all of these are where the graph is going to pass through, where this graph would pass through the x-axis. So let's take a look at how this is actually done. Alright, so we want to solve this first equation by factoring. Alright, it's in the proper form. I have ax squared plus bx plus, well, c is 0 in this case, but the main idea is that every equation needs to be set equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, you need to use a little bit of math to get it equal to 0. Alright, so I'm going to factor this. So the first thing I'm going to do is factor out the GCF. Well, there's only two terms here, and they both have an x in common. So I'm going to, well, actually they have more than just x in common. They have a 4 in common as well, because 4 goes into 6, they have an 8 in common. My bad. 8 goes into 16, and 8 goes into 8. So 8x would be the GCF. So I'm going to factor out an 8x. So if I factor out an 8x from the first term, I'd be left with 2x. If I factor out an 8x from the last term, I'd be left with 1. Alright, well now I have two factors. 8x is one of the factors, and 2x plus 1 is the other factor. And if I multiply these two together, I'm supposed to have 0. So what that means is that either the first factor is 0 or the second factor is 0. That's the zero product property. If I multiply these two together and the product is 0, then either of these could be 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what the x would have to be in each of these cases for the factor to be 0. So what does x need to be for the first factor to be equal to 0? And what does x need to be for the second factor to be equal to 0? If I solve this, I'll have my two solutions. So I can divide by 8, and I can see that one of my solutions, or one of my x-intercepts, would be 0. That's one of my solutions, 0. I can solve the second equation by subtracting 1, which gives me 2x is equal to negative 1, and then dividing by 2. So I can see that one of my other solutions is going to be x equals negative 1. Alright, well this should make sense. This is where these two, remember this is a parabola, and it looks like it crosses the x-axis in two places. It crosses the x-axis at 0 and at negative 1/2. And these are going to be my two solutions. Alright, and that's it. I've now solved this. These are the two solutions. So number 2 is not equal to 0. It has 4x squared equals 16x. So I need to get this so that it's equal to 0, so I need to get this 16x. I need to subtract it to get it on the left side. So that I will have 4x squared minus 16x equals 0. Now I can solve this. First, I'm going to factor out the GCF. And in this case, the GCF is 4x. So 4x is going to come out. I'll be left with an x for the first term and a minus 4 for the second term. Well, I have two factors here, 4x and x minus 4. And these two factors multiply to give me 0. So that means either this factor is 0 or this factor is 0. Well, I need to find what x value makes each of these factors equal to 0. First one should be pretty easy. Of course, in order for the first factor to be 0, x must be equal to 0. So one of the solutions is 0. The second one, I'll add 4, which means that for the second factor to be 0, x needs to be equal to 4. So my two solutions would be x equals 0 and x equals 4. This would be where the graph, these are the two places where the graph crosses through the x-axis. So these are the two solutions. Alright, let's look at number 3. Number 3, it's equal to 0. So we can go ahead and try to solve this. Since it's equal to 0, we don't have to change anything. This is a trinomial, x squared plus bx plus c, which means we're going to have to factor it. And we can use the shortcut on this one since the a value is 1. So up top, I'm going to have a times c, so I'm going to have positive 64. And the bottom, I'm going to have b, so I'm positive 16. I'm looking for two numbers that add to 16 and multiply to 64. I'm looking for 8 and 8. So this factors to x plus 8 equals 0. Alright, so what this is telling me is that the two factors, x squared plus 16, x plus 64, are x plus 8 and x plus 8. And when I multiply them together, they're equal to 0. So either this one is equal to 0, or this one is equal to 0. And they're actually both the same thing, so both our solutions are going to be the same. Our first solution is negative 8, but so is our second solution. If we solve the second one, if we figure out the second one, we're going to get negative 8 as well. So we only have to write it once. The solution is negative 8. This one only has one solution, which means that it touches the x-axis. The vertex is actually on top of the x-axis, like here. Comes down, touches the x-axis, goes back up, and that happens at negative 8, so it's actually over here. Alright, number 4. This one is not equal to 0, so I need to get it equal to 0, which means putting the 20 on the other side. So I got x squared minus 9x plus 20 equals 0, and now I can solve it. So a is 1, so I don't have to do factor by grouping since a is 1. Up top is a times c, so positive 20. Bottom is negative 9, the b value. And I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to positive 20 and add to negative 9, and those are negative 5 and negative 4. So this factors to x plus 5 and x minus 5. It's getting ahead of myself. And x minus 4. And these two factors multiply to make 0. So either this one is 0 or this one is 0. And if I solve these, I will get my two solutions or my two x-intercepts. My first solution is 5. My second solution is 4. So my two solutions are 5 and 4. These are my two x-intercepts, these are my two solutions. Alright, so number 5 is a mess. It's not in standard, well, I guess it will be, but we do need to get this equal to 0, which means that this negative 8x squared is going to have to come to the other side here. So this is going to become 8x squared minus 14x plus 3 equals 0. If I try to factor out the GCF, I will see that the GCF is 1. So there's no factoring out the GCF. So it looks like I need to factor this, but the a value is not 1, so I'm going to have to factor this by grouping. So I'm going to have to do this the long way. Up top is a times c, so 8 times 3, which is 24, positive 24. And the bottom is b, is negative 14. Looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 24 and add to give me negative 14. It looks like I'm looking at negative 12 and negative 2. Negative 12 times negative 2 is 24. Negative 12 plus negative 2 is negative 14. So, since this is factored by grouping, these are not my factors. This is just going to allow me to split up negative 14x into two different numbers. It's going to be 8x squared minus 12x minus 2x plus 3. And we can still have the equal 0 here. We're not really worried about the equal 0 right now. Alright, so I'm going to factor the GCF out of each of these groups. Factor the GCF out of the first group. Factor the GCF out of the second group. GCF of the first group is 4x. GCF of the second group is negative 1. So if I factor 4x out of the first group, I get 2x minus 3. And if I factor negative 1 out of the second group, I get 2x minus 3 equals 0. So, my two factors, or these two have something in common, they have 2x minus 3 in common, so I can factor out 2x minus 3, and what I would be left with is 4x for the first term, and negative 1 for the second term. Alright, well now I have the factored form. So this tells me that either this factor is equal to 0 or this factor is equal to 0. So either either 2x minus 3 is equal to 0 or 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. So if I solve these, I will get my two solutions. So 2x is equal to 3. Divide by 2, x is equal to 3 halves. Okay, so there's one of my solutions. Add 1. 4x is equal to 1. Divide by 4. So my other solution is 1 over 4. And those are my x-intercepts. Those are my two solutions to the equation that I started with, 3 halves and 1/4. Alright, so the homework, page 49, 13 through 24.